YouTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome to my channel, Bouquins and Books. In this video, I will do something very original. I will rank Jane Austen's novels. I have read all 6 of Jane Austen novels, and in fact I read the 6th one, the last one I hadn't read. I read it last summer, and it was Sense and Sensibility. Now at the time I thought, okay, that means it's finally time for me to do my ranking of Jane Austen's novels. But then I thought it wouldn't really be a ranking of Jane Austen's novels, it would be a ranking of what I remember of my reaction to reading Jane Austen's novels. Because most of them I read in the early 2000s. The first Jane Austen I read was in 2003. Now, I know a lot of people from my generation met Jane Austen or encountered the works of Jane Austen in the 1990s, where there was this revival. There was the BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth. There was the movie Emma with Gwyneth Paltrow. There was the movie of Sense and Sensibility directed by Ang Lee and starring Kate Winslet and Emma Thompson. So there was this whole Jane Austen revival thing going on, and for some reason it completely escaped me. I did not read a single Jane Austen book. Yet I was aware of her name, but I did not read any of her books. Probably I thought I wouldn't like them. And then one day I was traveling, and that was in 2003. I was abroad and I was looking for a book to read, and I was in a country where there was no English or French spoken. I think it was in Austria. And I went to the bookstore, and there was one shelf with a few books in English, and one of them was Mansfield Park. So I bought Mansfield Park and I read it, and I liked it. So that was the first Jane Austen I read. But I have never reread it since. So it was this one-time read in 2003. I got rid of the book because I was traveling, so I was exchanging them, and I've never reread it again. The year after, in 2004, I read Pride and Prejudice. That one I loved. That one I made sure to buy a copy, and I have reread it many times since, and I have seen adaptations, and I just love that book. Next, I read Emma, and then I read Persuasion, and then I read Northanger Abbey, and all of that in a few years, in the span of 2 or 3 years, I would say. And it's only last year that I read the 6th novel, which was Sense and Sensibility. Now, since I have not reread Northanger Abbey or Emma since, and also Mansfield Park, I don't remember all the characters. I don't remember all the plot lines. So my ranking is what I remember from my reaction. It's not so much the content of the book. And the reason I decide to film a ranking, even though I'm not sure of the books, is to provide a starting point, sort of a picture, a before picture. And then hopefully in July, in Jane Austen July, I will do the after picture. I want to reread Jane Austen. Not necessarily all the books. I don't think I will prioritize rereading Sense and Sensibility, but I do want to reread Emma, Mansfield Park, and Northanger Abbey, and perhaps Persuasion too. And if I have time, then Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility too. But it's not necessary, I think, to do a official ranking in July. I would mainly need to reread the 3 that I have not reread ever. Now, I already a bit gave away my top ranking, so I'm going to start at the top. My favorite Jane Austen novel, and the one that I think is the best, is Pride and Prejudice. I have read and reread that book. I love this book. It's one of my favorite books. And let's be honest, I don't think the #1 place can be taken by any other book. No matter how much I will reread Emma or Mansfield Park, rather how much I will love them on rereading Emma and Mansfield Park, I very much doubt that it could take the place of Pride and Prejudice. It's the best, and I think it's unbeatable. But the other places are up for grabs, and I had difficulty ranking them because I remember so little of them, for certain. The one at #2, and it's a clear #2, is Persuasion. I have reread this book. I have read it cover to cover more than once, and I think it's wonderful. I love the main character of Anne Elliot, and it's a lovely book. So at the moment, this is my #2. There's a good chance it will remain at #2, but it's not as permanent, I would say, as a #1 spot. That is Pride and Prejudice. Now, for the other 4, that is where it gets a bit murky, because 3 of them I read so long ago, it's hard to give a definitive ranking. Well, it's not a definitive ranking. That's the thing. I'm not quite sure what it is that I'm ranking. I'm not ranking the book. I am ranking how I reacted to the book. So at number 3 would be Mansfield Park. Because it was the first one that I read, I had very little expectations. I think the only perhaps disappointment I had when reading the book was that the love interest was the cousin, and the cousin, and of course I can't find his name, Edmund, was not the most amazing person on earth. I mean, he's no Mr. Darcy, even though at the time I had not read Pride and Prejudice, so I couldn't compare to Mr. Darcy, but somehow I felt that the hero was a bit lacking. But it was the only thing that I did not like about the book. The rest, I don't remember not liking anything. I don't remember finding places long or boring. I don't remember anything negative about it. So that's why I would put it at number 3. At number 4, I would put Sense and Sensibility. The reason I would put this one at number 4, there was a bit of a disappointment when I read it. I think the two heroes, the two love interests are a bit lackluster. And I think the Dashwood sisters deserve better, particularly in the case of Eleanor. And I also think that the villains in this book are not as likable, are not as spectacular as in other Jane Austen books. In Pride and Prejudice, to compare to the best. The villains are Caroline Bingley and Lady Catherine de Bourgh and George Wickham. And I think these characters are so much more interesting than Willoughby or Fanny Dashwood or Fanny Dashwood's mother that we barely ever see. So that's the reason why I think Sense and Sensibility is not as good as some other Jane Austen books. So that is the one that is at number 4. At number 5, I would put Emma. I don't remember that much of the book. I remember feeling confused. I don't remember why. That's the funny thing. I don't remember why, but I remember being confused. So that is one that upon rereading could go up in the ranking because a lot of people love Emma. And I really don't remember that much. I remember more the movie with Gwyneth Paltrow than I remember the book itself. So I remember being confused. I remember a sense of disappointment. I don't know exactly why. Perhaps because it's the one that I read after Pride and Prejudice, and Pride and Prejudice was so good. So perhaps that's the reason why there was this sense of disappointment. So that is why I would put Emma at number 5. And as you can hear, I don't have much to say about the book. I just remember my reaction to the book. So I'm very curious to see what I will think of the book on rereading. And that is the one that I will reread first because that's the one that I own a copy of. And at number 6, that leaves Northanger Abbey. That one is the 5th that I read, and I remember also being confused, not understanding what was going on. Now I know that Jane Austen was a bit mocking all this Gothic literature and girls reading this Gothic literature and being overly influenced by it. But at the time, I did not understand it. And I thought the tone of Northanger Abbey was so different from the tone of the other books that it was not really Jane Austen. So that one was clearly a disappointment. Now, Northanger Abbey, I remember nothing about it. I know the characters' names because I've seen booktube videos where people talk about it. But other than that, I would not be able to tell you what the plot is and who the characters are and what's the conflict or what is the reason the plot line is moving forward. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. So that is basically the reason why it's at number 6, is that it left so few impression on me, except that bewilderment that, why, this doesn't sound like Jane Austen. So that's another one that I'm curious to see. Now that I know what it's supposed to do, now that I know that it's mocking this Gothic literature, will it go up in the rankings? So that is my ranking of Jane Austen's novels. And yeah, now I'm just repeating myself. I'm going to reread the ones that I haven't read in almost 20 years. And I hope I will be able to do a ranking that is more about the books than about my reaction to it this summer for Jane Austen July. So meanwhile, I'm posting this because it's Febregency and because it's always fun to hear about Jane Austen. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!